the White House.
We've been made public enemy number one. How about seeking exile or asking for help from other nations?
No. I'm the president. I can't be the one to start a war in this country. I'll be the one to wage the war.
Mr. President.
Yup, 10 out of 10. Thanks for watching, folks. Until next time. Okay, seriously. I knew very little about Metal Wolf Chaos outside of this one cutscene that convinced me to get the game.
You just don't get it, do you? Freedom is dead! You and your men and this symbol of freedom will all perish!
And oh my god, believe me when I say that that's just the tip of the iceberg. Calling this game insane would be letting it off lightly. Metal Wolf Chaos is every bit as hilarious as it is bizarre. And thankfully, the gameplay is actually pretty creative and interesting. Although it does have cracks in way too many areas, which is a shame, but overall, this game isn't half bad. Around the end of the first quarter of the 21st century, which is a really long-winded way to say the year 2025, the vice president wages a coup d'etat and takes control of the country. It's up to the current 47th president of the United States to save the day, returning freedom to the people by using his awesome mech suit and arsenal of huge guns. The story itself isn't quite the game's draw, but rather it's the setting, characters, dialogue, and most of all, the voice acting.
This is like starring in John Ford's My Darling Clementine. Wanna find out who gets to play Wyatt Earp?
It's not so bad it's good per se, because I think that implies that the comedy would be unintentional. But this game is actually really funny. It has that idiotic, absurdist humor that you might find in Adult Swim cartoons, and it is undeniably done on purpose.
A heart of justice is a heart that loves America. Surrender now, while your crimes are still not so serious. But if you refuse surrender, based on Article 48, Clause 4 in the newly enacted U.S. Constitution, Metal Wolf sympathizers and/or any blood relatives removed 4 times or less, as well as schoolmates in all educational institutions, such as high schools and universities, as well as any co-workers or associates. For any and all related people, a public execution will be carried out. So, to any terrorist sympathizers, if an ounce of justice still remains in you, give up on that man and surrender by 5 p.m. today. This is our final ultimatum.
There's even this remarkably stupid running gag where every single mission has to have a special code name, preceded by a drum roll.
This mission goes by the call name Operation Arizona Blood and Gunpowder Smoke. Good luck and Godspeed, Mr. President.
I really can't tell if I'm laughing at something stupid or if this game is brilliant. Unfortunately, the locales that are used are disappointing. Most of the big popular spots are here, like San Francisco, Houston, Texas, Chicago, Miami, New York City, the Grand Canyon, Alcatraz. That's kind of an odd one, but okay.
Stop and surrender, Metal Wolf.
Surrender?
If you fail to comply, the Alcatraz cannon will zap you back West Coast.
Will it now? Not if I zap it first.
Mr. President, the Alcatraz cannon just started to recharge.
I'm on the move. I'll smash it faster than a Florida recount.
But what about Yellowstone National Park? The snowy mountains of Colorado would have had the potential for something good. But most of all, would you believe there is no Mount Rushmore level? For a game that exaggerates American patriotism and is all about doing a continental tour, how the hell is Mount Rushmore not in this? Now, this does play into how the game is really short, which is itself a bigger problem than how my complaint of how a few more states should have gotten represented, but put together, those two are big flaws. As I'm sure most of you are aware, Metal Wolf Chaos was made by From Software, who are famous these days for Dark Souls, but they've also had a long-running mech series, Armored Core. So with that in mind, it might not be too much of a stretch to see where Metal Wolf Chaos is coming from. Except that the same team that worked on Armored Core wasn't involved in Metal Wolf Chaos's development. The two teams did have small discussions and advice was given, but this game was handled by a totally different group, and I think it shows. The gameplay isn't necessarily bad, but it is very unrefined. However, like I said earlier, it is really interesting and creative. Each of the controller's triggers fire the guns in your right and left hands respectively, and the overlapping squares act as crosshairs for each gun, with different guns having their own height, width, and range as far as targeting goes. Pressing the circle button disables the guns from being used, and then pulling the triggers now switches between your available weapons, up to a total of 4 in each hand. Then, pressing circle again will equip your chosen guns. It's a little clunky, and it's really annoying that switching weapons isn't just put on the shoulder buttons instead, which aren't used for anything, but the way it's implemented isn't terrible, and you do get used to it after a while. It's a really cool idea to have a bunch of weapons available at once, and better yet, being able to freely dual wield whatever combination you like. It reminds me of an old school first-person shooter, or in a way, kind of like the PlayStation game Einhander, since you can dual wield any combination of weapons and they all have varied attributes. The way that weapons are implemented is really neat, but there are other aspects about the guns that aren't so hot. The player is awarded with points depending on their performance on a mission, and they can be put towards building new guns or researching brand new weapons. Theoretically, having a research tree and a build order like this is a good way to stay invested in the game. But one of the main problems I have with it is that you have no idea what's waiting for you until you spend your points. Not even the next immediate unlock is revealed. You can't know if the upcoming weapons will be something you'll like since very few of them are straight upgrades. Most of them have various strengths and weaknesses, so it would be nice to know if your investments will be worth it, at least for the short term. Speaking of which, the railguns are completely useless. They charge up and fire way too slowly, and while their firepower per bullet is really high, which makes their ammo efficient, that's rarely or ever a concern. Not to mention that it's one of the few weapons that can only be used two-handed. But aside from the railgun, most of the weapon types just aren't that good. The shotgun is okay early on, but it quickly loses its value. Although using the shotgun's incendiary rounds is a decent option against enemies weak to fire if you don't want to use a flamethrower, which itself is another weapon that can only be used two-handed. The sniper rifle is extremely powerful, but on top of also requiring both hands to use, the player is forced to stand still and go into first person as soon as it's equipped, leaving them way open to attacks. Really, the only weapons that have decent value throughout the game and are worth upgrading towards the end are the machine guns and the bazookas, and having a fire-based weapon on the side can be a lot of help as well. Maybe an assault rifle is good to have too, but I'm sure you can get by just fine without one. It is such wasted potential to have so many weapons at your disposal, but you're actually way better off taking like 4 bazookas on any given mission. What makes this really terrible though is that the player can easily corner themselves by wasting their points on the wrong guns. And while this doesn't make the game unbeatable, it does mean that they'll need to replay older levels over and over again to grind out more points in order to buy the good guns. While I do appreciate the level of customization, it is clearly unbalanced. It's also worth bringing up that From Software's usual pedigree of using a claw grip to hold your controller returns here as well, with the square button being used to boost. It's even worse in this case due to how Metal Wolf Chaos is faster paced than Dark Souls, and there's also a separate jump button. So this whole setup is hardly ideal, but with practice you do kind of get used to it. However, if you can't stand holding your controller with a claw grip, then you're gonna have a real bad time with this one. You can also press in the left stick to boost, but it needs to be kept pressed down the whole time, even while pushing in the direction you want to move in, which makes it so uncomfortable that I wouldn't even call it a viable option. There is a fair bit of variety between the missions, which is really nice. Some of them require you to get through a gauntlet under a time limit, fight 3 mini-bosses at once, or search the city to destroy specific targets. It doesn't matter that much though, because the enemy AI is pretty pathetic, and under most circumstances you'll easily breeze through the game, only to get a game over when you've unintentionally done something wrong and get yourself killed almost instantly. This also hurts quite a bit because there are no checkpoints, so if you die, then that restarts the whole mission. Most of them are fairly short, but for the longer and more difficult ones, it can be frustrating. It's such a shame. I really want to praise this game for the fast-paced and enjoyable combat, but there are just way too many flaws that I can't ignore. Even though Metal Wolf Chaos was obviously made as a big joke, you can tell that a lot of effort went into this, which is what makes bashing this game hurt even more. The level design's not half bad, the mission variety is pretty good, and the customization options are great, not to mention how legitimately funny it is. Unlike Far Cry 5, which was so tone-deaf in how overly patriotic it was, and it didn't clash well with the serious moments, Metal Wolf Chaos knows exactly what it's trying to be, and it pulls it off extremely well. It's just too bad that it's brought down by so many other aspects. The enemy AI is poor, the controls aren't the greatest, the guns are horribly balanced, which in itself plays into how easy it is for the player to screw themselves over if they buy the wrong guns, and to top it all off, the game is very short. Even with a fair bit of grinding, I still beat the game in about 12 hours. Although I did look up online which guns are recommended since I got stuck on the later bosses, and at that point, I was ready for the thing to be over. After completing the game, there's a New Game Plus option that allows the player to repeat missions while keeping all of their equipment. And there's also a harder difficulty too. But after my initial run, I definitely had enough. I don't hate this game, I actually enjoyed myself quite a bit, but I gotta be real with what this game has to offer. And as a recommendation to most people, I do think that for the most part, it is worth playing, but you're gonna have to deal with a bit too much jankiness. Thanks for watching my review on Metal Wolf Chaos XD, and happy US Independence Day!
Now the beach will be crowded with vacationers once again.
Yeah, for those who survived.
Great going, Mr. President.